Racial segregation in the US is not in our past. It's our present. There's a crazy wealth gap between white and black Americans that's tied to home ownership. White Americans hold 7 times the wealth of black Americans, the same ratio as in the civil rights era. And even though black people make up nearly 13% of the US population, they hold less than 3% of the nation's wealth. Now you have to understand that owning property is the major way American families build wealth. But when state-mandated discrimination stops black people from owning their homes, the growth of their wealth gets halted too. Okay, you have to go way back to see how this happened. When the Great Depression hit, the federal government created public housing to help American families for the first time. They mostly made public housing projects for white people, but there were some made for black folks too. By the mid-1930s, the government was offering subsidized mortgages at a fraction of the price for white families, so they could move into brand new houses in the suburbs. Black people were specifically prohibited from these deals. They instead had to stay in public housing, often paying more for their rent than white families paid in mortgage. On top of that, the practice of redlining grew across the nation. The HOLC created city maps to indicate the level of risk for real estate investments. These maps ranked desirable neighborhoods for lending, such as white suburbs, in green, and marked undesirable or risky neighborhoods, often populated by black communities, in red. As a result, redlining destroyed the possibility of investment wherever black people live, ruining their chances at growing their wealth, property, or social mobility. Meanwhile, the government backed $120 billion in low-cost home loans between 1934 and 1962. More than 98% of these loans went to white homebuyers. By the time housing segregation was banned in the Fair Housing Act of 1968, it was too little, too late. The damage was already done for generations. The inequity of homeownership had launched a domino effect that made it far too difficult for black families to try and purchase homes in similar suburbs. These neighborhoods had quadrupled in value over time, leaving black Americans far behind. Today, 73% of white households are homeowners, while the percentage for black households is only 45%. Even worse, black people who reached homeownership sometimes faced violence as a result, at the hands of white Americans and police. Racially segregated neighborhoods have a grave impact on many realms of American life. Where you live can determine what kind of education is available for your children, how much wealth you can have, your relationship with law enforcement, and even your own family's health. The biggest takeaway from all of this? Racial segregation and the wealth gap in the US is not just due to personal prejudice or private actions. Instead, it's a direct result of state-sanctioned policies intended to stop black Americans from achieving success that in many ways continues today. Racial segregation.
All right. Welcome to the Healing Chronicles.
I have a Savior, I'm ready to go to that land where I'm I have a Savior. I have a Savior. Open it up. It's empowering. I have a Savior.
All right. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Monda Webb, your host, and wanted to introduce your co-host, the lovely Miss Rhonda Mendoza.
Hello. How's it going, Monda?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. I'm ready.
Yes.
Yeah, the Healing Chronicles might need to be called the Heating Chronicles because
Haha.
we gonna eat it. It's gonna be hot tonight.
Hey
All
now,
right. Hey, hey.
just
So,
like the market.
well, yeah, for now.
Yep.
Uh-huh. Yo, that's like that's my sister Diana. We went to high school together. So, Diana, thanks for coming on. This will be very interesting. Basically, for those of you who are just joining us, the Healing Chronicles is a monthly discussion with the intent on creating not only anti-racist but learning history and applying learning the lessons from the history of the past and applying it so that we can be better human beings in the future. Rules of engagement. We just want to make sure that you feel comfortable, that we have an honest and spirited dialogue without attacking one another. There may be differences of opinion, but we all bleed red. So let's get into it. Um, every episode, I dedicate the discussion to someone or something or some entity. So this discussion is dedicated to the Biden administration for passing, creating a new federal holiday for Juneteenth. President Biden, as you can see, said excuse me, let me go back. This is a profound weight and profound power, a day in which we remember the moral stain, the terrible toll that slavery took on the country and continues to take. And I think that's fantastic. And that was a week ago.
Hmm.
But just yesterday, and when I was talking to one of my elders who's been around a long time, and she said, well, we got this. I wonder what they're going to take away from us. And I was like, oh man, this is something wonderful to celebrate. Howsoever, she probably right. And as it turned out, um, for those of you who may not know, the discussion boo hiss is the United States Senate blocking the For the People Voting Act. And I'm sure that our fellow activists and Healing Chronicles um, guest that's here all the time, Miss Margaret, will have something to say about that. But in a nutshell, the For the People Act was going to be put in place to help some of these restrictive voting laws that the GOP is passing in different states. So they didn't get this one, but they get the boo hits of the day. Let's see, Janet, are you on? Janet Tomasia?
I'm
And
here.
oh, you are. Okay. So before we move on, I also want to give a shameless plug for a book discussion about Juneteenth that the Sage Sisters will be having on July 1st and July 14th. Jen, do you want to talk about that briefly?
Oh gosh, yeah, I didn't know you were going to put me on the spot.
You know how I do.
Sure, I can do that. So I have asked, and Connie St. John has graciously agreed to facilitate a discussion on this book for the Sage Sisters, but also in partnership with Rhonda and a few other organizations at the bottom that you can't see. But we're all kind of coming together to bring all of our communities together to have a discussion about this book. So all are welcome. And Rhonda or Monda has the link if you'd like to participate.
Okay.
Rhonda and Monda, that's confusing.
Okay. I mean, you can try to combine it if you like. It'd be all right. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So,
And then we're also coming together to co-promote Monda's next Healing Chronicles, which will be on July 28th.
perfect. I do have that as a matter of fact. So, for those of you who are new to us, everything that we do with regard to the Healing Chronicles is we approach it Sankofa style. So, Sankofa is an Akan or Chi word from the Chi and Fonte languages out of Ghana. And it's if you look at the graphic or the image, it the proverb is not an abomination to go to your roots and take what you forgot. And then san meaning return, ko meaning go, and fa meaning look, see, or take. So primarily, our little guy here he has his feet. Again, you can't see that either. He has his feet planted one way, and then his neck is turned another way, and the egg he's holding are like the future generations. He or she is a future generation. So we go back to the past, learn the lessons to move forward to the future. So today we are going to before we start the history aspect of fair housing, I wanted to just share why I thought it was important to have this topic. And I have probably synonymously put fair housing along with affordable housing because, in my mind, I don't think there's any affordable housing now, and I don't think it's fair. So, with fair housing, is National Home Ownership Month, and I can tell you that as a realtor, it's been a very very interesting year and a half, and I don't know, I can't tell you what the factors are. All I can say is COVID, but it's made people a little cuckoo, and with the very low, historically low interest rates that we've had, there are lots of people, and you've heard this on the news, lots of people looking to buy, and there's just not a lot of housing stock out there. So what happens is, with the frenzy, especially in this area, people we have a tendency to get a little creative. And so when I say people, I'm talking about buyers as well as their realtors, including me, if you're working with the buyer. And I mean, it's gotten to the point where the average house, I literally saw an article yesterday where the median price of a house in the United States is $350,000. And in this area, houses are going in Maryland and in Washington, D.C., houses are going for 5 to 10% over asking price. And in some instances, buyers, not only are they waiving inspections and appraisals and just taking any contingencies off of the table, they're offering to pay their sellers to pay the seller's closing costs. So sellers have at any given time, from 10 to 20, sometimes 25 offers to choose from within a matter of days. So it's a market that's bananas. I have a housing practitioners on the line that can speak to it, but I tell you, it's not sustainable, and I'm very concerned because for those people who are looking for the American dream and they don't have money in the bank, they might as well just sit down, you know, because you cannot compete. You can go to your 401k or IRA savings, but if you don't have that, you cannot compete. And that is just, I don't believe those are the ideals in which this country was built or founded on. So I'm going to play a little bit of a video about Levittown. I don't know if you all are familiar with Levittown, but there was a developer, and his name was Abraham, and he is responsible for like the largest suburb in the United States post-war in terms of how he made this little cookie cutter houses. He and his sons. And the significant thing, the first set of house, the first suburb that he did was in Long Island, New York. He bought like 4,000 acres on a potato farm, and he built all these lovely houses with, just a sprawling suburb and neat sidewalks, and everybody looked like June Cleaver and so on. But he did have something in the deed, which for every individual who purchased a home, they could not be Black. So these the houses were, if you were a veteran, you could put zero, no down payment, and if just a regular hardworking person, you could put $10 down for a down payment. And the houses were going, I think they were going for about $90,000. No, it couldn't have been. I have to check my facts. But nowadays they're about $500,000. And so Levittown in New York, and then he did another one in Pennsylvania. So when the first Black family moved into Levittown, Pennsylvania, um, you'll see how they were.
I don't see nothing but the curtain.
All right, let me play this for you.
Okay.
Let me know if
In
you can
what
see the
way?
screen.
What?
Well, the property values will immediately go down if
Hold on.
I'm not on mute.
Can you expand that one?
Yeah, as a matter of fact,
Will that work?
yeah, hang on a
Okay.
second. I'm gonna stop share. I'm
Oh,
gonna, what?
I just no,
I'm
I
gonna play
was
it.
looking for all the participants. There you all are.
Yeah,
Hi.
I'm gonna play it from YouTube.
Yes.
So that way, we can see fully. All right, here we go. Everyone can see?
Yes. Perfect.
All right, let's roll.
This is Levittown, Pennsylvania, a new suburban community of 60,000 people midway between Philadelphia and Trenton, New Jersey. With its giant shopping center, winding lanes named for flowers and trees, it is fairly typical of communities all over America, where families are pursuing the American dream to give their children a better chance in life. In August 1957, Levittown, Pennsylvania attracted international attention when violence erupted as William Myers Jr. and his family moved into the three-bedroom house at Daffodil and Deep Green Lanes. In almost all respects, the Myers family is close to the Levittown norm. They have 3 small children, the youngest only 1 month old. Myers served for 2.5 years in the Army and was discharged as a staff sergeant. He works as a laboratory technician and is studying for a degree as an electrical engineer. His wife, Daisy, is a college graduate. The Myers home is modestly furnished, and their late model family car was bought on time. They are very close to the Levittown norm, except in one respect. William Myers Jr. and his family are Negroes in an all-white community. Some view the incident calmly and indicate acceptance of the fact. But for others, the Myers moving into Levittown constitutes an infringement of their own liberties.
and we understood that it was going to be all white. We were very happy to buy a home here.
How about your children? Have you talked with them about the Myers?
We have tried to keep the discussions away from the children. I feel that it's something that we adults should solve without bringing the children into it any more than we have to. We're doing it for the children, but I don't feel that they are old enough to understand the problem as it is.
Do you think a Negro family moving here will affect the community as a whole?
Definitely.
In what way?
I think that, well, the property values will immediately go down if they are allowed to move in here in any number.
And what of the dream of middle-class respectability? If a Negro family can afford what you can afford, how do you justify your feeling of superiority? What other objections, aside from the effect on property values, do you have against the Myers?
He's got 3 children, and evidently he feels that they will be accepted socially. And I don't feel that they ever will be. But the whole trouble with this integration business is that in the end, it probably will end up with mixing socially. And you will have, well, I think their aim is mixed marriages and becoming equal with the whites.
Do you intend to move?
At the time, no. It's a pretty impossible situation. We have our home here, and if the colored move in and run real estate values down, there are a lot of us, the GIs particularly, who are going to be more or less stuck with their homes.
As the lines are drawn, those on either side become more adamant. Tension develops and feeds on suspicion and mistrust. What has been the effect of the Myers coming here?
Well, it's created a great deal of tension, not among the neighbors, because we all feel the same. But it's naturally made everyone tense in their home.
But there are others who are for the Myers?
Yes, I've read about them.
For what reason, do you think, do they support the Myers?
Frankly, I don't know what reasons they can have for it. If they are homeowners in Levittown, I don't see what reasons they can have for it.
Do you think Myers will be able to live here comfortably?
Comfortably? No.
What course of action are you going to follow?
I'll do what I can to help to get them out legally and peacefully. And as far as accepting them socially, that's what you mean, I could never do that.
Do you think the Myers will be able to live comfortably in Levittown?
I think so. I hope so. I think the majority of people here will grow accustomed to it and realize that, they can be good neighbors, which I'm sure they are. And I think the majority of people here are not the violent, violent group that we have heard so much about.
Marriages, and that's eventually what it's going to come to. If children are raised together, they're not going to think of anything of marrying together.
Well, I just could not live beside them. I don't feel that they should be oppressed. But I moved here, one of the main reasons was because it was a white community. And that's the only place I intend to live. If I have to leave Levittown, I will do so.
As elsewhere in America, there are those who believe that the rights and privileges of citizenship belong to all, regardless of their race or color or creed. And there are those who believe in equality too, but in a somewhat more limited sense. Has the coming of the Myers affected your home life?
Personally, my home life, it hasn't affected nothing whatsoever. But on the neighbors, they have a right, because the average white person living in Levittown has 4 and 5 children. Well, let's put it this way. If the Levittown is migrated in hordes of Negroes, which they have a right to come here, but if something that happens that way, pretty soon my neighbor will be having a Negro son-in-law or a daughter-in-law. How would that look?
There you have it, an American community caught suddenly in a moment of crisis. Neighbor set against neighbor as they differ on what should be done about one Negro and his family who have come to share with them the American dream of a better way of life for their children. Is intermarriage the ultimate goal of Negroes in seeking to integrate into previously white communities? The studies show that of all the reasons Negroes have for seeking equality of opportunity, intermarriage is the least. And of all the fears that whites express, this is the greatest. Can we prepare our communities to receive these new neighbors in dignity and peace? Or will we wreck our communities with violence and abandon them in panic? This is the challenge posed for us as Levittowners sum it up for themselves.
I don't think you can take a middle of the stand here. Either you're for them or against them.
I've taken a stand for peace and nonviolence and no intimidation of the Myerses. I don't have any prejudice against colored. It's just that I wouldn't like to have one as a neighbor.
We would act to them as we would act to any other neighbors. We would be friendly towards them and speak to them and visit with them.
I wouldn't care to live in the community where the Negroes would be living.
I think that the majority of people here will accept things and believe, as I believe, that a good neighbor is not one whose color is white or black, just as a good citizen is such.
Mr. Myers and all the Negroes have a right. I'm no better than them. They're as good as I am. But the only reason that Mr. Myers came into Levittown is to show people they could get here.
I just feel that they're within their legal rights to move in here. And if they move in and are law-abiding citizens, I have no complaints.
If more colored are allowed to move in, Levittown is going to go downhill.
I don't think that the Myers have anything to do with the property decreasing or increasing. I think it's purely a white problem, not a Negro problem.
The main issue is the right of these people to live like Americans.
Okay. All right. Okay, so
It was August 1945, and America had a reason to celebrate like never before. World War II was at an end, and
All right, that's what happens when I go outside of the program. But at any rate, let me share with you guys again. How many of you all were familiar with Levittown? Yeah.
I'm familiar with Levittown.
Yeah, I think that yeah, it's coming from a New Yorker. I think that you know, unfortunately, mhm, some of those same attitudes are prevailing and have bubbled back to the surface today, as evidence with the January 6th um, uh,
Insurrection.
yeah, yeah. So we
The
are going
coup.
to, well, yeah. Uh-huh. Mark, are you here? Mark Austin? No? Okay.
Mark Alston is here.
Oh, okay. So before I introduce Mark, I just wanted to say that I'm rocking my NAREP shirt today and all of my little real estate pins. But is anyone familiar with the National Association of Real Estate Brokers as Realtist? Have you ever heard of Realtist?
Yes.
Well, the mortgage people, yeah, but you know, for the average person that says, you know, I'm dealing with a realtor, okay, that's all well and good, but even the realtors, the National Association of Realtors, didn't allow for it was actually against the law for blacks to sell homes, and so the National Association of Real Estate Brokers was founded in 1947. And Mark Austin, Mark, I want you to introduce yourself when you come on any way you want, and I will put the PDF of the State of Housing in Black America in the chat for our guests. So, but I'm just here representing. So I'm a realtor and I'm a realtist. I'm also a member of the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. So, Mark, you ready?
I am. So, my name is Mark Alston. I'm in Los Angeles, California. I've known Monda Webb for several years. I am the public affairs chair for the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. I've held a variety of offices. But what I really do is the presentation. National Association of Real Estate Brokers, as Monda said, was founded in 1947 out of a need. Blacks had come home from World War II fighting for freedom in other countries and found that they didn't have freedom here, the opportunity to live where they wanted to live, to buy where they wanted to buy. And then they weren't allowed to join the National Association of Realtors. And so they started their own organization in Tampa, Florida in in the summer of 1947, 12 people, 11 men and one woman, with the motto of democracy and housing. We have been at the forefront of legislation and policy that to improve Black home ownership since then. We were instrumental in the Fair Housing Act, starting with the Rumsford Act here in California, that then migrated and ended up in the Fair Housing Act, Title VIII of the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Well, you're gonna have to excuse me. I meant to put my phone on vibrate. I am super busy right now. Black home ownership in America today, first quarter 2021, is at 45.1%. White home ownership is at 73.8%. There's a 28%, approximately 28% gap. That gap has been the same since the Fair Housing Act started. Gap was actually lower. It was 22% in 1968. It has gotten worse. Maintenance of status quo has shown to be the overwhelming social construct. There has been targeted opposition to Black home ownership since the Emancipation Proclamation. And I think that's the thing that I want people to recognize and realize. It's not, the gap between Black and white home ownership is not an accident. It's not happenstance. It's not random. It's not because Blacks are worse or don't want it. It's because there was actual opposition starting from the Emancipation Proclamation, maybe with the exception of 12 years of Reconstruction, to Black home ownership, because home ownership is the foundation of building wealth in America. You had exclusionary zoning laws. You had private covenants where blacks were not allowed to be in an area as indicated by Monda. You had federally institutionalized redlining discrimination that was done as a result of the Great Depression. They started a program. White home ownership had got down to just about 50%. Black home ownership has never been 50%. The highest it's ever been was 49.1% in 2004. When white home ownership got down to 50%, it was a national tragedy, and they started FHA to improve it. We had the urban renewal. We had the 49 or 56 Highway Act. All of these types of things have destroyed black home ownership opportunity. And today we have disparate housing finance policies. Blacks are typically charged more for buying and or refinancing. You have the appraisal problems where black neighborhoods are devalued, and I won't say much more, but redlining didn't just affect mortgage availability. Those homeowners loan corporation maps, their risk assessment maps, were used by insurance companies. They were used by city planners. In the blue and green white neighborhoods, they planted trees and put in parks. In the red and yellow mixed race and black neighborhoods, they poured cement. And so the environment is different in those neighborhoods and continues to this day. It's real important that we narrow this gap of home ownership, that we advocate for things that will change status quo. The National Association of Real Estate Brokers is advocating for restorative justice down payment assistance fund. I had the benefit of being part of the Evanston reparations movement. I wrote the historical context and testified to it in Evanston, and it passed using the revenue from legal marijuana tax to fund down payment assistance to prospective black borrowers in the suburb of Evanston, Illinois. We just had Marsha Fudge. Thank God for Marsha Fudge. She just recalculated and restated how they're going to calculate school loan debt in students that want to qualify. 86.8% of black students that go to four-year public institutions have school loan debt. School loan debt is $1.7 trillion. It's the biggest debt in America. She just recalculated to make it easier for those who have school loan debt to buy a house, and then loan level price adjustments. That's an egregious price, a black tax is being charged to those who put down less or have a lower FICO score, but otherwise qualify for Fannie and Freddie loans. They started in 2008. Prior to 2008, there was no such thing. They were put in effect in order to save a failing Fannie and Freddie. Well, Fannie and Freddie borrowed $191 billion. So far, they've paid back over $297 billion. Not one dime has gone toward a housing program, $106 billion in profits. It's time to eliminate this tax that charges those with a lower FICO score and or those with a lower down payment and get back to their original mission statement. So I kind of leave it at that, other than to say that what we have today is intentional. It's egregious, and unless we radicalize our ask and step out of the box of what we think and say, and not be afraid to upset the apple cart, then we will continue to have a wealth gap. Last year, 2019, there were 9,500,000 mortgages in America. In 2020, for whatever reason, there were 14,500,000 mortgages in America. The tide raised all the ships, but of course it didn't raise them equally. It's time that we find targeted answers to not just level the playing field. My opinion, fair housing isn't fair because you already had 359 years of slavery and Jim Crow, and fair housing, equal treatment cemented in the differences. We've got to have some targeted programs designed to narrow that gap. Thank you, Monda.
Thank you, was very powerful indeed. Before we go to our next speaker, does anyone have any questions for Mark?
Can we add, excuse me, I apologize. Can we add something, because it just really, if I may, is that okay, or is it not time yet?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to ask also with the with credit reporting, because I'm one of those people that believe that the rating system is a bit antiquated, and it's lengthy. And I can't help but to think that, okay, it's lengthy. It's lengthy in dropping negative marks on your credit, and it's lengthy for a reason. And that's why I question that, and I've always in the back of my mind thought that it stays that way for a reason.
Can I speak to that?
Absolutely.
So Fannie and Freddie and FHA use FICO 04, which is an antiquated version of FICO. They're at FICO 9 now, and they refuse to incorporate things like Vantage scoring or other methods of credit scoring. Credit scoring is necessary in our modern system in order to facilitate the computerized underwriting. You've got to take the credit, turn it into something digital that the computer can read, so that we get AUS, the automated underwriting systems, approval that provide fair, safe haven to lenders that approve the loans. If they get a DU or LP, a desktop underwriting or loan processing underwriting approval, then they have safe haven from litigation for borrowers who say they made them an unsafe loan. So that credit scoring is a requirement in order to have the computerized underwriting. The problem is there's absolutely no transparency in the algorithms. As we get into technology and algorithms and automatic valuation models, the lack of transparency is its subjective bias that for the programmer comes out in the approval or lack of approvals. We've talked about this. I also think I see credit all the time. I believe that FICO scoring is weighted based on the economic status of census tracts. I see similar credit with similar depth, with similar trade lines from two different economic type census tracts will have 100 points difference. Why does that matter? Because when you have a lower FICO score, the loan level price adjustments will charge you more for the same product. So you can have the same credit, either buying a house or refinancing, and have to pay a higher interest rate for the life of the loan based on the lack of transparency in our credit underwriting system. Fannie and Freddie use FICO 04 for a reason. It's more restrictive and has a lower score than FICO 09. That makes the tranche of loans less risky, and they brought in this private-public partnership for this, to alleviate the cost and risk supposedly to the American public. But Wall Street, the private part is Wall Street and their fee incentive. So they want the least risk loans with the highest fees to those loans, and that's what's happened to our public housing finance system today. That's my opinion on that.
Thank you, Mark.
I see it more clearly. It's not necessarily that it's, well, it is a little bit antiquated with the way you said it. They're using an older version, which is
on purpose.
On purpose, yeah. And I know pretty much what. I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we're going to move through our speakers, and we're going to open it up for.
Can I ask Mark a question, because I got cut off at the last time?
Oh, okay. Sorry, Wendell. I didn't know. I'm trying to figure out how to put this file in. So go right.
Okay, I was just being Mark, that you and the other young lady, Diana, have been in the field and you have a closer look at it. Me as a novice buying a home, and we see these different understanding. If you have a good credit score, your rate comes down. The thing that I see is being a first-time buyer, second time, what do we do or who do we go to find out how can we better our score before we go out and purchase a home to get a better interest rate? You know, it's kind of like in a cloud there, and I'm a drop there.
I'm going to make you a suggestion. I made the suggestion to, I did an interview with the reporter Steve Crocker in Birmingham, works for Fox News in Birmingham. I spoke to him yesterday. He had a similar question a month ago. And I told him to find a Black broker. We suffer from not having loan originators that look like us, that care about us, or have a vested interest in our community. And so we don't get the sort of approval rates and personal care that others might get. When you go to a local area broker, they'll sit down with you, they'll counsel you, they're accountable to the neighborhood, and you'll find that, you know, not to call names, but name calling sometimes is necessary. For instance, Wells Fargo's approval rate for Black borrowers last year is 29.7%. They barely approved seven out of every 10 loans that they were submitted to them. Whereas United Wholesale Mortgage, the largest wholesaler that most brokers go to, approved 75.9% of Black borrowers. So you'll find that non-bank lenders and brokers who use them will be the place that you have the most success and the most hands-on treatment.
Can I also make a comment, Monda?
Uh-huh.
Hey, this is Herman Palmer. Another resource that you can go to is a HUD certified nonprofit housing counselor. These are organizations whose sole purpose is to help people understand the process of buying a home. In addition, they look to connect you with the available resources, such as down payment assistance programs that will qualify you based upon either your income, your employment, or where you want to buy a home. The benefit there is that it's less out of pocket expense to you, so that you have more money after the deal is done. And God forbid, if there's a problem, you have money that you can fix if there's damage or something that occurs, an emergency that occurs after the fact. Could be home related, could be your car, doesn't matter. But nonprofit, again, HUD certified nonprofit counselors are like a coach. You know, when you were in school, if you were having problems in Spanish or chemistry, you needed help, you went to a tutor. These are individuals who specialize in tutoring you on what's necessary, the steps. They help you get comfortable with the lingo and the jargon, because think about it, this is one of your biggest purchases in life. And it is easily to become a victim because of something you don't know. You want to have as many resources at your disposal to empower you, to educate you, to help make that decision-making process a lot easier and connect you with the resources for the sole purpose of making you successful, not in just getting into the home, but also maintaining the home for the long term.
So are these rates competitive? Are they the lower rates, or do you pay a higher rate because you have a few more special attention?
Nope, they don't get paid. I mean, they're not for profit, they're nonprofit, so they don't affect your rates. If anything, they may get you a better rate.
What about a refinance?
They can help you with refinance also.
Absolutely. Refinance, credit, savings, anything that you can think of. These counselors or advisors are there for you, and they're in every state. And you can go to HUD.gov to see who is certified. So they've been certified by Housing Urban Development. And Jerry, I know you're on. I want to be, and you work at HUD. I don't know if you wanted to speak. I know you can't speak necessarily on behalf of HUD, but if you had something you wanted to say, feel free.
Hey, Monda, I have a lot to say, especially when you you focused on Levittown, because Pennsylvania was one of my people in the portfolio, and I would just say we got invited to Harrisburg, to sit down. I just explain what I used to do. I still work for HUD, and I used to run the neighborhood stabilization program. That was an Obama program that happened in 2008 to kind of put together to help prop up the economy. So when there were a lot of foreclosures, abandoned property, we kind of gave states and nonprofits and local governments money. I also work with the CDBG program. But what I just wanted to say, just as an overall thing that I've learned in my 11 years of being there, is just that a lot of the stuff that the policy is really the meat of what we have to do to make the changes, and it happens at the state level or the local level. That's where everyone is making the rules about how they're going to spend on affordable housing, down payment assistance. They get to decide how that money will be divvied up. And if people aren't involved in like the comp plan and stuff like that, then they get to make the rules. Like, for instance, we were noticing something happening in Texas where they just wanted to focus on senior housing, and they wanted to focus on senior housing because they didn't want to do affordable housing for families. That was their workaround. But if people aren't, going to the meetings or kind of pushing back, then it becomes harder. And then I just wanted to speak about about fair housing and back to Pennsylvania. So we went to Harrisburg. We had the whole HUD team. Pennsylvania was in big trouble with a lot of their fair housing that they, that they weren't really putting their teeth into it. Or let me say, holding people accountable for not the things that were coming up. I'm sorry, my daughter said, so the things that were coming up. And so what I found out was just that the state pushed back, and they did not want to hold these people accountable for fair housing. And they basically told us, like, make us. And then again, it comes back down to us, HUD, holding them accountable by implementing, the right sanctions against them. And that's when I started seeing that we just weren't sanctioning these states or local governments for fair housing. And that, and if people don't know what's really going on, especially, people who are, I guess, the average Joes, they don't understand that that's going on. It just continues to perpetuate itself over and over again, and they get away with it. So that's just a little bit of what I've learned. But I would just like to say that people really got to get involved at the local levels and open up those plans, because those people are the ones who are really deciding how the money is going to be spent. Whether they will have down payment assistance programs, whether they want to go ahead and maybe use it to fix up, some lights or a street or something like that, and instead of doing something that's affordable housing. So just, people just get more involved in the process at the local level. That's really where I think the changes can be effective.
Thank you, and Jerry, extremely informative. Okay, so with that, I am going to bring up our next speaker. We have a young person in the house. I think it's important to get perspectives from all ages. And Miss Ebony, just I'm gonna give her a hand for getting her Master of Fine Arts in Documentary Productions from University of North Texas. So Ebony, so proud of you, my dear. And I'm just going to play an excerpt from your awesome documentary, and then I want you to talk about that, why you felt you need to make it, and if things have actually improved in the Dallas-Fort Worth area since you've done the documentary. So I'm just going to play an excerpt from it, and let me get to the part I want to show here. Okay, can everybody see?
Of creating a new segregated pattern elsewhere.
Good morning, America. How were your dreams? I bet they involved a white picket fence. I bet they involved a cis, straight, hetero couple too, and I bet they were white. Because the American dream was never made for people of color. Instead, I'm supposed to act like I can have your dream too, when I was never supposed to be seen as anything more than the white man's property. I'm supposed to strip, stand, show you I have healthy teeth, a strong back, show you I'm a good Negro. I'm supposed to play poster child and never reap the profit from my success. And I suppose you already know that. And you already know what's wrong.
And ain't that a pity? To walk the earth knowing they don't see you as anything more than an opportunity, when you know you are so much more. And Black voices been telling y'all this for years, been telling y'all that this country ain't never been fair or equal or free. Instead, you try to gentrify my America, whitewash my city, and kick the people who built it out of their homes. Call it urban renewal. I call it stolen. Call it gerrymandering past my comfort zone, and you don't give a damn about my well-being. And my great-great-grandmother was born a slave, and we Black people have been climbing to the top ever since, still praying that my children will be able to keep my house after I die, still praying that they won't fear, that they won't be successful enough to live in a nice neighborhood full of Black folks. And Daddy says you have to work twice as hard just to get a lower pay. And I guess that just means I'm 3/5 human. And maybe I'm 3/5 a poet writing this. And maybe you'll only hear 3/5 of what I'm saying. To be privileged is to be blind-eyed and back-turned, not to give a damn about anybody's problems. And here I am shouting it from the tower that you built, standing in the middle of a neighborhood you coming to claim from us. Oh, good morning, America. I hope you finally hear me this time.
All right.
Thank you, Monda.
That was awesome. That was awesome.
Can y'all hear me?
I need to stop.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, I guess to answer your question, Monda, well, hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here. This is an amazing conversation. To answer your first question, why I made the film, I think I am just a product of where I'm talking about the years of this oppression really upon people of color. And I grew up in a suburb of Dallas, but my family came to Dallas, has been residents of Dallas for about 50, 60 years. And my grandparents live South Dallas, and Dallas is extremely segregated, very evident in the way you can go from the north side of the city to the south, and it's extremely different in the resources and the infrastructure. So they are residents of South Dallas in a predominantly Black neighborhood. And I think growing up, though, in a suburb, a white suburb, me transferring back and forth as a child, I would notice the difference. And I really couldn't articulate then, like, why is it so different? And the first thing you put to reason is a people, an environment. And so I was like, maybe, I don't know, is it because people are Black in this area that this area is not as thriving as a suburb I'm living in? And so it kind of created a sense of, sadly, like self-hatred and hatred of myself as a Black person, because I was like, why are we not seen as valuable? And so let me try to compose myself in a way that is valuable. But growing up and becoming more knowledgeable of who I am and the story of my people and Black Americans, it's institutionalized. And I came to that realization. And so in my program, this was the second year film that I created. And initially I was going to do another film about something else, but that fell through. And over the summer, I was given the book The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein by my boyfriend. And it just kind of like clicked for me. And I was like, wow, I never knew this. And why don't I know this? Like, why don't we all, especially people in my generation, know about this? So I had to make the film. And so I centered it around a story that was happening a couple years ago in West Dallas. West Dallas is another low-income area that has been poorly resourced over the years. It actually was one of the first locations for federal housing, one of the largest federal housing as I believe, in the nation in the 1940s, 1950s. And it's still progressively been abandoned by the city. But now it's become a hotspot for gentrification and revitalization. And so now it's majority Hispanic community and African American community. And I wanted to talk about, in 2016, there was a mass eviction because the city of Dallas had changed their housing code. And there was a owner of about 300 properties, and instead of wanting to pay to meet the standard of the city, he just decided to do a mass eviction of everyone that was renting. And so that was a big story in like 2016, but I came around to this 2018 when we were entering the anniversary of the Federal Housing Act, and really just wanted to discuss like what is going on with home ownership and for home ownership for people of color. And yeah, so the story focuses on West Dallas and kind of that story, what happened with the renters, but it's really also trying as best as I can in less than 30 minutes to talk about the history of housing discrimination and why these things are set up the way they are. It's a federal game. And it is, to answer your second question, not any better. The area is still being heavily gentrified. And yes, the entire really slowly but surely all of South Dallas really is. And the only thing, I don't know, the only thing I can do, I think, as a creative, not the only thing, but what I'm trying to do is to offer space for these historic residents to tell their story and to mark space as their own. I think what gentrification does and all these economic programs to revitalize the area is to almost kind of in a neo-colonialistic way say like, we own this area, or this area is only valuable because we're here. So I'm trying to wipe away that sense of authority from these newcomers and say that this area had history before you ever came, and you have to take time. If you're going to be here, you have to give space to the people who were here and help to build it. And yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, thank you. Beautiful. I mean, to be such a young person and to take on such an adult topic I applaud you for that. We had a situation here in Washington, in the District of Columbia, a couple of years ago, where this white man was walking his dog on Howard University's campus, and he wasn't picking up the poop. And the dog's poop, and someone said something to him, and he, suggested that they move the university. So, everyone loves a good coffee, but gentrification, that is a topic for another day. We could speak all day about that, because my question is and will continue to be, what happens to the displaced? So you're looking at it from another side of the spectrum. So thank you so much, Ebony. Really appreciate you. I know you got to run a Bible study soon. I wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to say what you had to say. Does anyone have any questions for Ebony before she leaves?
We also, Monda, I think that we also had a case in DC a few years ago where it was, I believe it was two young African-American gentlemen that were in their neighborhoods. And because it had become gentrified, one of the neighbors thought that they were suspicious and called the police. I don't know if you remember that, but they called the police on the two boys, or the two young men, also the two young men. And come to find out, they lived like right down the street, and they had actually been in the neighborhood since they were born. And so yeah, so then it becomes what Ebony said, a colonization of sorts, where it's where gentrification, and all of a sudden white people are here, and they're like, well, what are they doing in our neighborhood? Come to find out, we've been here before we even knew what gentrification was. And so that created, I can remember they they kind of let her have it, because it was how dare she call the cops on these kids, and they've been here and things like that. So
Thank you.
So that whole topic, yeah.
So Ebony, you have a request from one of our guests to see if we could share the link for the film. Are you okay with me sharing it?
For sure. Yes, the more the merrier.
Okay, well, I'll share that in the chat with the password. Okay. All right, so I am going to, Diana, you hang in there, because it is it's your turn.
It's my turn.
Yes, okay. So there we are. All right. So I have known Diana since high school, and well, you know what? She can tell you about herself way better than I can, but she's good people. How long have you been selling real estate, Diana?
Oh gosh, 20 years, and I'm dating myself too.
It's okay.
A little bit more than 20 years.
We got to own this.
Yes, I know. Seriously,
So thanks for coming on. And you've been a full-time agent, correct?
I've been a full-time agent and a dual agent as well. So
Okay.
So I've been through both. So
yeah, we gotta do what we have to do. So
exactly. To my daughter's college tuition will not pay for itself.
Oh, there it is. Then there's that. So I am going to. I'm not sure exactly what you want to cover, but the floor is yours.
Thank you. And while it's suggested that, well, not that it's suggested, but there's certainly laws now on the books of with regards to fair housing, and now there are a number of additional protected classes in DC, Maryland. I'm a realtor for DC, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. But when Monda alluded to this at the beginning, what are we talking about when we're talking about fair housing? You absolutely have to equate that with affordability, because and in affordability, we're talking about loans. I go to a settlement tomorrow where the appraiser, from what it seemed, I took so many notes on what the absolute pettiness of the small things with regards to the appraisal that they made people go through. It was a conventional loan. FHA, I understand that there are certain guidelines, because there are certain guidelines. Wow, they made my client go through the ringer of, so we met all the contingencies, in short. And I hesitate, and I probably shouldn't say this, but they're probably sitting back saying, doggone it, we got to give them the loan. But I mean, I think that when we look at affordability, everyone knows where affordable housing is in everyone's neighborhood. Everyone knows where affordable housing is. Now, I heard Chris Rock say something, the one thing that and I hope I'm not like kind of going all over the place or rambling, but I know that Chris Rock said one thing that was very interesting. Jim Crow is over. The new Jim Crow is you have a house that's 350,000 priced at 3 million in a neighborhood. So I mean that was kind of one of the things that I wanted to talk about, because that's also one of those issues where in you know, the Levittown issue comes back into play, where you know, all of that coupled with the fact that I believe in my heart that the interest rates are how am I saying this? The interest rates are artificially low. To me, they are anyway. But and when I say artificially low, it's because I don't believe that the banks necessarily can sustain themselves with such a low interest rate. But in any event, that's pretty much what I wanted to say with regards to affordability. You have to equate, you have to put them both together. I'm glad Monda put that together and Monda linked them together. But when you're talking about fair housing, it's inevitable that you have to link it with the affordability. And you have to also with the processes of purchasing a home, because again, appraisals are a big thing, and just the whole process with regards to people of color and white people. It just seems as though there seems to be more contingencies. There seems to be more, the process is way more arduous than it should be for our white counterparts. So that's my 2 cents, my rusty 2 cents.
No, thank you, Diana. Much appreciated.
Thank you for giving me this platform. I really do. I do appreciate it.
Absolutely. I mean, we can talk about the devaluation of property and you know, but again, I just wanted to have this forum so that we can talk about it, where we've been and where we should go. So that being said, does anyone, we're going to open it up now for questions. I know there's other practitioners, industry practitioners that may want to say something. I won't necessarily call you out, but if you want to say something, feel free to, you know, to just raise your hand or just come on camera, and I will, and you know, personal stories as well. I mean, you don't have to be an industry expert to know what's going on in the industry. And Ross, we did a good job of putting him to sleep. Oh, I can't wait to tease him. Rhonda, how are we doing? Do we have any questions in the chat? I'm gonna get Ebony's movie. Let me get that ready.
I think one of the things that we need to take note of, the power of this forum is that you have subject matter experts who are at different parts in the ecosphere, in mortgage and housing, real estate, and what have you. And the ability to share that, certainly within this group, but we need to do more sharing beyond this group. Right. Another point is we have, because of need, born out of need, we've had to form our own organizations. And Monda, you talked about NARAB. I think one strategy that we have to pursue is to have colleagues, peers, and ourselves in majority organizations so that we can see what's going on and how things are conducted and get a peek behind the curtain. I'll give you an example. When I was in business school, you know, people, and they broke out the class into groups for case study. You know, everybody like, well, the black groups, let's all the black kids get together. Let's form our group. That's not the winning formula. The winning formula is you make sure there's a black person in all the other groups. And then when they have their meetings, we all get together and say, okay, what did your group say? What did your group say? What did your group say? So that we have all the information. We need to get access to the information. Information is power. And so we absolutely need our own groups, but we also need to purposefully penetrate the other groups so that we can have invaluable insight and maybe even affect decisions and policy so that we tend to level the playing field. And then also share back with the Black organizations, hey, this is what's going on here. this is on the come up, so be aware of that. And policies coming that way. So what's the strategy on how we address that? So just a perspective on how we move forward to try to level the playing field.
Monda, I'm sorry.
I don't know if this is appropriate, but I'll mention it and kind of open myself up here. I wished I had known about these organizations about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. Savannah, Georgia, which is where I'm from, like most other cities, is going through gentrification. And the neighborhood that I grew up in Savannah, was predominantly Jewish back in the 60s, I guess from the conception of that neighborhood in the 50s through maybe the 70s or early 80s, when my family moved in. And subsequently, the neighborhood went from Jewish families to Black families. And there are still some Jewish families who live in the neighborhood. And the Jewish families would not sell to white families because the white families would not let the Jewish families move into their neighborhoods. So they purposely would not sell their homes when they got ready to move to white families. They would only sell to Black families or families that were non-white. This was purposeful. Okay, so now the neighborhood is majority Black. There are still Jewish families, but it's majority Black. My parents own 7 to 9, maybe more homes outside of their primary home and the home that they helped my siblings to purchase. I owned 2 homes in that neighborhood. Long story short, the reason I'm saying this is I was unaware of programs that could have helped me hold on to the properties. In the last 3 years, I sold 2 of the properties that I owned, and 4 of the properties my family owned because my parents passed away. My father managed the properties for me because I did not live in Savannah. The properties were in disrepair. We rented them to families, usually Black families who, could not keep them up. It was just a really, really hard cycle of trying to get families in. They move out because they didn't pay. Then you try to, refurbish the property so you could rent them again. Bad situation. I did not know that there were organizations that possibly could have helped me hold on to the home. And correct me if I'm wrong. What I needed at the time was resources to refurbish the home. When I sold the home, I sold it for probably $160,000 or $70,000. Investors purchased the home, and within 6 to 9 months, they resold the home for $340,000 or $50,000. And that happened not only to my 2 homes, but the other 4 homes that my family owned. And because I had no one there to help or no resources that I knew I could tap into, I felt I was forced to sell the properties because I couldn't hold on to them. I couldn't refurbish. The home values are going up exponentially. My family home, or my parents' home, was sold for $230,000. It sold about 4 months ago for $420,000 within 6 months. But what they did is came in and they refurbished everything. They basically took everything out and put lipstick on the pig. Made it, because the house had good bones, made the house beautiful from curb and, redid the kitchens and the bathrooms that you normally do and put paint on everything else. And were able to pull out $100,000 to $150,000 in the homes. So my question to you, after all that I just said, were there programs that I could have tapped into that would have helped me hold on to those properties? Does anybody know?
Well, I mean,
yes, Amanda, let me jump in there.
Okay, thanks. You're gonna
Yeah.
say where you're from, because I was gonna go to the Making Home Affordable.
Yeah.
Please feel free. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Hugh Rowden, and I work for Wells Fargo. I actually sit in the consumer bank today, but I've built my career in housing over the last 23 years. So Cynthia, really the only thing that could have helped you, because at that point, when it's not your primary residence, you're an investor. And really the only thing that you could have possibly done is that, you know, if all of your records were in order, meaning, you know, you had, you know, rent documentation to show the income coming in. You could have, there are a variety of different loans out there where you could have done a rehabilitation. I think both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have home style, and I forgot what the other one's called, but you could have done a rehab loan on investment property. You would have only been able to go to a certain percentage of the value, but you know, you didn't say how much you owed on the home, but you did talk about how much the you know, completed value, the new value of the home would be, because based off of what it sold for. So there could have been some different things that you could have done on that side, but programs are very different if they're investment property versus if they're owner occupied. And so it is good, but that's what a housing counselor could have helped you with. They could have helped talk you through different types of options and different things that are available. But you know, who you rent it to and how you cash flow and how you take care of those homes. You know, even myself as a landlord for two properties that I've had for years, you know, it can be a tough place if you don't have the disposable income to bring it back up to, you know, standards when you have a, you know, a poor tenant.
Yeah, being a landlord nearly broke me. It really did.
Yeah.
So I basically had to dispose of the properties.
Yeah. And see, even when you, so even if you are looking to do a refinance or to do some type of loan that has repairs, what the lender is going to do is they're going to count only a certain amount of that income as true income. They're going to hold back typically 25% of that income. So if you're getting $1,000 a month, they're only going to give you credit for $750 because they're saying, okay, the other 25% is for expenses. And so those types of things are taken care of in underwriting situations. But yeah, it's about having, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're renting again, it's about keeping, you know, good records and making sure that, you know, you go into this where you have some reserves just in case something happens, because as a landlord, it is going to happen. It's not when is it, but it is going to happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. When we're going to be at time at 8:30, and when that happens, for those of you who want to drop off, we will have enjoyed you. But we do have I have a video that we talked about Richard Rothstein and the color of law. There's a video called Segregated by Design, and it's about 15 minutes long. I think it's very powerful, and it just kind of encapsulates and recaps what we've been talking about. And so I just want to let you know that I'm going to play that for those who kind of want to hang on. So let's see, Miss Margaret, you've been very quiet tonight. I know, you know, you sit, that's your game plan. You sit back, you observe, and then you hit us with a wow we. So you purchased your home. I mean, you've been around for a while. Did you have anything that you wanted to share with?
No, I had simply just learned a lot tonight, and I'm so appreciative of all of the speakers. Ebony, who's no longer with us, a young woman who is just outstanding in what she is attempting to do, maybe not attempting, what she has done. And for the other seasoned real estate people, it's just been a pleasure listening to what I wish I had known years and years ago when purchasing homes, either in Chicago or here. We were lucky that it came out okay, but I'm sure we were cheated somewhat because of the color route scams, both in Chicago, where it was protective covenants in place, and here in Montgomery County, where I had moved into an almost all white neighborhood where some of the same situations being faced by members of the white public. It's right here in my neighborhood, in my block. Luckily for me, most of my neighborhoods, most of my neighbors treated me with the respect and dignity with which I treated them. So it proved to be a-okay in the end. But those of you who spoke tonight, I'm so appreciative of how you are helping people understand that real estate and owning property is indeed one way to amass wealth that you hand down to your children and your grandchildren. And without it, we're still in the same bad place that we were 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So Monda, I thank you for bringing this topic to the attention of all of us and to the speakers. Again, I can't say how much I appreciated your comments. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Miss Margaret. You had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, so Mark, I know you spoke earlier and you specifically called out denial disparity specifically for Wells Fargo. Would love to talk to you more about your comments. If you take a look at bank lenders, what you're going to see is a lot of consistency as it relates to denial disparity, especially if you extract what was purchased versus what was originated. And then if you take a look at, from a product perspective, who's using what product, because a lot of the larger financial institutions have pulled back from the FHA product because of the False Claims Act. Would love to just talk to you about it because, I don't know what time frame you're talking about, but, one of my responsibilities up until just recently was, we share our, every year we have a HMDA session with a lot of our nonprofit partners and a variety of different organizations. NARAB has been there and invited, throughout the years. But we share and we go over in detail our results from the previous year. And so right now we're in 21. Later this year, they'll be discussing what happened in 20, which will be really interesting to see because of the impacts of COVID. But would love to have some more dialogue on that. It's not an area of my responsibility anymore. My area is a little broader now, but that's what I do. It's focused on data and analytics to find the best opportunities for our banking customers, and that includes mortgage and now with Chuck Bishop over diverse segments. Would love to continue the conversation. I've been a member of NARAB since '98, and so
Hey, Hugh,
we'd love to dialogue.
Thank you, and that's probably one of the benefits of places and forums like this. I use the numbers I reflected. I actually have the numbers. I have access to the HMDA data, and the 20 data is out. So I have the 20 data, and so that's reflective of 20. Not meant to be disparaging, but theirs is the lowest number. I have contrasted and done studies with regard to depository institutions versus non-depository institutions, working with the Alana McCargo's group. I can't think of it. She just went to
the old group. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was on the Mortgage Collaborative for Urban Institute.
I just finished reading the discussion draft and briefing our president for her participation in that collaborative. Yeah. I'm real familiar with it, and Sarita Battles and Brad and all of those guys, I've had many of discussions with them from Wells Fargo at the time. It's not the institution, it's the system. And the denial rates are unreal, as you guys have reported to the U.S. Treasury and reflected in the HMDA data. So if Monda will give you my information, I would love to, because I have some questions as to how this could be. It is what is the reasoning and how do we make it better? We need people like you in positions like that as well as people like me to keep ringing the bell, people like you to be there to help us solve the problem. That's how we make it work. So if Monda can give you my information, or I can give it to you now.
I'll find you.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah,
I'll just send a text.
Yeah, woman.
Okay,
I'll send a
that'd be
group text
great, man. I appreciate that.
And if I could build
But let
on
me
that.
tell you this. So that's the reason why I moved from the lending side to the community bank side. So we have 68 million customers, which single digits have mortgages. We're struggling with African American home ownership. We're struggling with Hispanic home ownership overall. When you look at all of the different, when you look at from an ethnic, race or ethnic standpoint. And so, coming on this side, leading our customer segment strategy for the bank is the best way to help address, banking and lending opportunities, whether it's, establishing credit or, buying homes. So, yeah, I was on the phone with Chuck the other day. So, yeah, let's talk. We'll talk.
Okay, I love that.
I'd like to add also from what I do on a day-to-day basis, I'm a witness. Wells Fargo is aggressively investing in counseling to keep people in homes and to avoid rental eviction or foreclosure. One of the things about Black home ownership, we talked about the disparity. One problem is getting in the homes. The other part is keeping them in the homes. And Wells Fargo is literally investing millions in trying to help keep people, specifically people of color, BIPOC communities, in homes. So, I appreciate that effort. And it's exactly what I talked about in terms of we need to have people in those institutions so that we can come together and have these dialogues and keep everybody honest. So I appreciate that.
Monda, are restrictive covenants still in vogue in many places today?
They may not say it, but I'm gonna go ahead.
Well, restrictive covenants.
Hello.
Restrictive covenants still sit on title. They're not enforceable. There are other types. Racially restrictive covenants are not enforceable. There are other restrictive covenants and exclusionary zoning criteria, like single family only is one that tends to lessen the affordability of a neighborhood, and it increases, and it keeps the density down. There's still restrictive covenants sitting on title. Not race restrictive covenants are not enforceable.
Does that help, Miss Margaret?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We're talking about coming together and helping to solve the challenges. I mean, it's a mountain, but we can climb it. I'm convinced. Anyone else have any comments, observations? Because we're at time. Let's see. And I owe you all that PDF. I've been trying to get it in. I can only share it whether it's in Dropbox or Google. So I've been trying to, I'm doing a lot. So I can always email you. Bree, yes, you have a question out of Money Earning Mount Vernon.
Well, I tell you, that's a problem right there. Monda just outed me as Money Earning Mount Vernon. I think I have a comment that's kind of a question. And like someone else said, I don't want to go around in circles. But first of all, thank you. This is an education for me. And I actually understood most of it. I live in a town, this is the comment. I live in a town that is on the cusp of either entering gentrification or being a haven for Black and immigrant middle class. We're a city of homes, but we've recently been inundated with, well, not recently. We have a lot of apartment buildings. I live in a cooperative building. But if you know anything about Mount Vernon, and I know we're being recorded, so I have to be careful what I say here. We are less than 10 miles to New York City, adjacent to Connecticut, adjacent to New Jersey. We don't have the best reputation of the Westchester towns, Westchester County, New York being one of the most
affluent,
the highest tax, one of the highest taxed counties in the country. Mount Vernon has extremely high taxes. I'm not sure which direction Mount Vernon should go in. I'm older now. I guess I'm a little more conservative, but I can understand the plight of the homeowner saying that the only tax base we have is home ownership. And so on the one hand, you have people that want more affordable housing because we're a dense community, 4.2 square miles, somewhere between 70 and 100,000 people, depending on what, the last census said, but we know it's over 70,000 and could be as much as 100,000. We're sitting on top of each other. And the homeowners, they're the only revenue generator for the most part. The new buildings that are going up, some of them are affordable housing that have pilot programs where the owner's not really paying taxes or they're turning the property over. Some of them are market rate, and the average person around here says, well, what is market rate? So the question is, what is affordable housing? It's not affordable for everyone. What is market rate? Give me some help here. You want the community to have a stronger tax base. You want the community to grow. We're too close to the city with 3 Metro North train stations, as everyone always says, 2 subway lines. We're ripe for the picking. So how do we build up the tax base without getting rid of the folks that are already here? I guess that's the question.
Well, I'm going to ask a New York, New Jersey guy to pop on her mind. Do you want to tackle that?
That's interesting. Here's the thing. It is a very complicated problem. You're basically a bedroom community for New York City. And the challenge is when you look for business and industry and whatnot, that's not where you are. Back in the day, that wasn't the purpose you served. But there may be opportunities to attract business to you. It might be entertainment. It might be, you pick a particular area and you rezone it for commercial. And then all of a sudden it becomes office buildings. And so you take some of that business that people go to New York City for, and you bring it to Mount Vernon. You got Denzel Washington grew up there. You got Heavy D grew up there. You got Al B. Shore.
Felicia Rashad.
So you got people where entertainment can be a huge opportunity. Summer fairs and things like that. I think Mary J. Blige, maybe she might have been Yonkers. I'm not sure.
Yeah, next door near Yonkers. Next door near Yonkers.
But is it Sunny? Is Sunny Mount Vernon? Sunny Houston?
Oh no, she's further up. She went from the Bronx to Upper Westchester.
Oh, okay.
The point is, you might have to reimagine. You might have to reimagine the opportunities within Mount Vernon to make it more commercial, and you can determine what that looks like.
And Herman, I'm sorry, there are those that want to do that, but there are those who feel like they're going to be displaced when that happens. So I don't.
Yeah.
Now that's
you
got to pick your poison. You got to pick your poison.
Yeah.
But there may be I'm not that familiar with Mount Vernon in terms of what it looks like today, but there may be an area of condemned buildings because, everything has grown over years, but things have also dilapidated over years. take advantage of the dilapidated buildings and reinvent them to be business centers, reinvent them to be areas for entertainment and things of that nature, or education, something.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Just
Yes.
a thought.
Yeah. Also make sure you focus on policy because, you know, there could be things that can be done, like San Francisco's done some really neat things around legacy homes. You know, if a home has been in a family for a period of time with helping to control the tax millage rate. And so, you know, look, fighting off or stabilizing a community from aggressive gentrification takes a lot of people. You have to be able to talk to homeowners and get them not to sell their home for pennies on the dollar because someone went to them and told them, well, I'll give you $200,000 for the home. Not understanding that they can't find anything else for $200,000 and you know, that home may worth $1 million. And so, you know, it's a coordinated effort that you have to have if you're going to focus on you know, preserving your community, and everyone's going to have to be on one accord. You're going to have to almost have a success matrix around this is what we want collectively as a group, and this is how we're going to go after getting it.
You know, you're going to have to talk to your local politicians because my neighborhood it's gentrified. It's a done deal. It's over with. I'm in Baldwin Vista, Baldwin Hills area in Los Angeles.
What?
All my neighbors used to be white. I used to be black. Every neighbor is white. Every house that sells, it's replaced gentrifyingly. The prices have gone through the roof. I would not pay what they charge for these houses that I live in. And now they've changed. They passed a bill to supposedly cure homelessness, but it issued waivers for density and height requirements. And now they've built condominium units and structures that no one in our neighborhood can afford. $3,000 for a 500 square foot apartment, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, $15,000 a month.
Whoa.
They just built 1,210 units around the corner from my house that can't nobody in my neighborhood afford.
15,000. Oh my God.
And what happened? What I'm saying here, yeah, 15,000. What I'm saying here is our local politicians that looked like us passed these bills, sold us the homelessness issue, but issued the waivers in the same bill that further intensified the gentrification, and it's over with. We lost it at the political, we lost it in the proposition box. So watch out for that. You know, you're gonna have to come together with your local politicians to make sure that their idea is the same as what your community is.
Yeah. I wanna build on something that Mark, I believe it was you who mentioned it earlier. In terms of subsidies, legal marijuana, I mean, cannabis, do the marijuana tax. And then repurpose those funds for use in the community and preserving or supplementing you know, protected classes or, you know, elderly people or first-time home buy, something like that. But hey, you know, New Jack City and all that, remember the movie, all right? So now it's time to use that to our advantage. Let's rock with it.
Thank you again, gentlemen. I was in LA for 10 years, and so I'm very familiar with that area, Baldwin Hills. And you got my head spinning right now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to build on what Mark and them said. You gotta get in on the ground level locally. And for a HUD side, they already do consolidated plans, which they have to submit. And that's how a lot of small areas like, you know, Mount Vernon are going to probably use like CDBG money. And they have to go ahead. Yes.
You popping.
I'm popping. Okay, hold on. Can you hear me now? I might need to.
I can hear you, but it's like a steady stream of static.
Okay, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
is that better?
Mr. Roboto. No, it is not.
Okay, all right. Let me see if I can go downstairs and get closer to the router, which is, I pay so much for files, it should be working all across the house.
Well, maybe they know what you're talking about. So
That could be it. That could be it. Is this better?
It's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll make it quick. I put a chat and a link to the consolidated plan. That's what all local governments have to submit, their 3 to 5 year plan on what they want to do in their community. And how they plan to use that money, whether it's for affordable housing, whether it's for fixing streets, but it gives you an idea of what their plans for the future are. So you get to see where they plan and what their plans on. And if you don't agree with it, that's a good way to get in at the ground level to say, hey, we're going to start to fight this now before it gets out of control.
Thank you. I will look for the link.
Thanks, Jerry. Much appreciated. Okay, yay. Thank you all, gentlemen. So just to let you know, I'm going to upload it to YouTube, so the link will be available. Mark, you were invaluable. Thank you so much for coming through. This is, I'm just appreciative. So thank you for taking the time, especially at the last minute.
Well, no problem. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Okay, so just to, I don't even know where I am anymore. Hold on. I want to get this, this film started and to tell you what we're going to do next month.
Yes, July 28th.
Yeah. Janet, are you still on? Okay, hang on. All right. Let me pull this up again. Okay. All right. I think I have it now. I think I have it. Oh, well, this is good stuff. And I didn't have much energy, but you guys really, helped with, with giving me a B12 boost. So I appreciate you all. All right. I think I have it here. Okay, here we go. So next month, mark your calendars for July 28th. Janet, who's with the Sage Sisters, Peggy Sullivan out of She Can as a nonprofit organization, and the Roaring Tree, Amy Dagliano, and Connie St. John's with No Webb Productions. We're all getting together. And then Molly Pompadit from the SOAR Community Network. We're all getting together to talk about, in a nutshell, why Black folks don't trust white people. And, we're going to look at the history of it all and to, talk about what we can do kind of moving forward, primarily with understanding and then putting some context around why a lot of, for example, getting a shot. Why there's lotteries. They're giving lotteries, as you in this area. And Mark, they're like, people are getting like thousands of dollars for just getting a shot. You never know. I think they're going to do a draw Saturday. So, and they're really focusing on Black and brown communities because of the distrust. So next month, to tune in, register July 28th, and we look forward to seeing you. So now this book, this Color of Law, that's been so important. I'm going to play this video, Segregated by Design, and then we'll close out for the evening. But thank you all so much. If you have to jump, we appreciate you. Rhonda, any last words before I start this video? You're muted. You're muted. You're muted. You're still muted.
I am. Hi. Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. Yes, We Wear the Mask unveiled July 28th, and we will update you with the e-flyer again. Save the date on Eventbrite, and we'll give you that Zoom link once again. And find us on Instagram, and Monda will also be using Twitter. Thank you so much. Back to you, Monda.
Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna get this thing rolling. Can you see?
Yes.
Okay. Doesn't want to play? That's okay. I have something for it. Okay. All right, let me stop the share. Wait a minute. What?
The link for next month, we will give you the Eventbrite link.
Well, you know what?
Right? Do we usually post it on Facebook and all our social media pages first?
Well,
and then Monda has a mailing list as well.
I do, but the link is the same. So I got it. I just had to go outside of the Vimeo for this. Okay. Can everyone see? You can.
In the middle of the 20th century, the city of St. Louis, Missouri, and the United States federal government condemned and demolished the neighborhoods in downtown where African Americans lived, displacing.
What was that, Rhonda?
It's just the audio.
You don't? Okay. New share. All right. Here we go. Okay.
There it is.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you.
In the middle of the 20th century, the city of St. Louis, Missouri, and the United States federal government condemned and demolished the neighborhoods in downtown St. Louis where African Americans lived, displacing thousands. They built the Gateway Arch. They built a university, interstate highways, hospitals, and middle-class housing that was unaffordable to the former African American residents. Those who were displaced then relocated to the few other places available, converting inner ring suburbs like Ferguson into new segregated enclaves. We have been led to believe that racial segregation in housing was de facto segregation, by accident or the result of private prejudices. Yes, private prejudice clearly contributed to segregation, but by itself it could not have segregated the country without the intention of the federal government to segregate neighborhoods throughout the nation. If, however, we understand the accurate history, the history that was once well known but we've all now forgotten, that racially segregated patterns in every metropolitan area like St. Louis were created by de jure segregation, racially explicit policy on the part of federal, state, and local governments designed to segregate metropolitan areas, then we can understand that we have an unconstitutional residential landscape. And if it's unconstitutional, then we have an obligation to remedy it. The federal government in the New Deal of the Roosevelt administration of the 1930s pursued policies in the mid-20th century that segregated metropolitan areas. One important policy was the first civilian public housing program, which frequently demolished integrated neighborhoods in order to create segregated public housing. In the late 1930s, another New Deal program, the United States Housing Authority, was adopted. The very first projects built under the United States Housing Authority authorization were in Austin, Texas, because the most aggressive proponent of public housing at that time was the congressman from Austin, Lyndon Baines Johnson. And Johnson got the United States Housing Authority to put its first projects in Austin, separate projects for whites, for African Americans, and a project for Hispanics. The project for African Americans was placed in a location that the city plan of Austin had designated as a ghetto for African Americans. The United States Housing Authority and the local Austin Housing Authority demolished something called Emancipation Park, which was a celebrations location for the abolition of slavery. The design was to move all African Americans in the city of Austin into this community, whether in public housing or in private housing. The city of Austin then began to close schools for African Americans elsewhere in the city, and close libraries and other public facilities to force African Americans to move to the east side. Another program that the federal government pursued to enforce segregation was the work of the Federal Housing Administration, the FHA, which subsidized the development of suburbs like Levittown, New York, on condition that they only be sold to white families and that the homes in those suburbs had deeds that prohibited resale to African Americans. The Federal Housing Administration's underwriting manual said that inharmonious racial groups should not be permitted to live in the same communities, meaning that loans to African Americans could not be insured. Government at all levels throughout the nation were involved in promoting and enforcing the restrictive deeds in homes and places like Levittown, and judges enforced the view that these deeds did not violate the Constitution because they were private agreements. Although white middle-class families that moved into suburbs like Levittown could buy property with no down payments if they were veterans and low-interest mortgages, middle-class African Americans had to make substantial down payments and get uninsured mortgages with higher interest rates. In many, if not most cases, African Americans could not get mortgages at all because the federal government would not insure them. As a result, they bought their homes on contract, like an installment plan where they accumulated no equity and could be evicted from their homes in the event of a single missed payment. Thus, contract buyers do not have the option of leaving a declining neighborhood before their properties were paid for in full. If they did, they would lose everything they'd invested in that property to date. The term redlining comes from the federal government's creation of maps of urban areas nationwide. And those maps were color-coded to indicate where it was safe to insure mortgages. Anywhere African Americans lived, even places where African Americans lived nearby, were colored red to indicate to appraisers that these neighborhoods were too risky for the FHA to insure. The FHA's justification was that if African Americans bought homes in white neighborhoods, or even if they bought homes near those neighborhoods, the property values of the homes they were insuring, the white homes they were insuring, would decline, and therefore their loans would be at risk. In 1940, for example, a Detroit builder was denied FHA insurance for a project that was near an African American neighborhood. He then constructed a half-mile concrete wall, 6 feet high and a foot thick, separating the two neighborhoods, and then the FHA approved the loan. In the 3 decades during which it administered this policy, however, the agency never provided or obtained evidence to support its claim that integration undermined property values. In fact, often racial integration caused property values to increase because African Americans' housing supply was so restricted and they had so many fewer choices. If African Americans had access to housing throughout metropolitan areas, supply and demand balances would have kept their rents and home prices at reasonable levels. Without access, landlords and sellers were free to take advantage of the greater demand relative to supply for African American housing. A 1946 National Magazine article described a Chicago building where the landlord had divided a 540 square foot storefront into 6 cubicles, each housing a family. He had similarly subdivided the second story. Total monthly rent was as great as that generated by a luxury apartment on Chicago's Gold Coast along Lake Michigan. Such exploitation was possible only because public policy denied African Americans opportunities to participate in the city's white housing market. As the federal government concentrated low-income African Americans in single neighborhoods, the homes became overcrowded. Families had to subdivide their homes to make their mortgage payments or their property tax payments. Cities frequently withdrew public services from African American neighborhoods. They collected garbage less frequently. They didn't provide water and sewer services. Polluting industry and toxic waste plants were placed in African American communities in order to protect white neighborhoods from deterioration. The result was that African American neighborhoods frequently turned into slums. White homeowners looked at these places and assumed that slum conditions were characteristics of African Americans, not of government policy that forced this kind of overcrowding. White homeowners then became resistant to African Americans moving into their neighborhoods because they thought they would bring slum conditions with them. Of course, the slums were not created by the people. They were created by the forced concentration, the overcrowding in these neighborhoods. Blockbusting was a scheme in which speculators bought properties in borderline black-white areas, rented or sold them to African American families at above-market prices, persuaded white families residing in these areas that their neighborhoods were turning into African-American slums and that values would soon fall precipitously, and then purchased the panicked white homes for less than their worth. Blockbuster's tactics included hiring African-American women to push carriages with their babies through white neighborhoods, hiring African-American men to drive cars with radios blasting through white neighborhoods, or making random telephone calls to residents of white neighborhoods and asking to speak to someone with a stereotypically African-American name, like Johnny May. State licensing agencies that regulated real estate agents could have easily stopped this practice. All they had to do was to lift the license of one or two real estate agents who engaged in these practices, and the practices would have ended. While many de jure segregation policies aimed to keep African Americans far from white residential areas, public officials also shifted African American populations away from downtown business districts so that white commuters, shoppers, and business elites would not be exposed to black people. This was accomplished with slum clearance. One slum clearance tool was the construction of the federal interstate highway system. In many cases, state and local governments, with federal acquiescence, designed interstate highway routes to destroy urban African American communities. In the 1950s, there was a white middle-class neighborhood in Los Angeles that wealthy African Americans began to move into. It was called Sugar Hill. The first thing that happened was that the neighborhood association got together and tried to buy out the African American families who were moving in, offering them more money than the African Americans had paid in order to get them out of the neighborhood. When that didn't work, white homeowners tried to enforce a legal agreement prohibiting them from living in the neighborhood. And when that didn't work, the city council then decided it would be an African-American neighborhood. It rezoned it for multiple family housing. It eventually became a slum. And then the Santa Monica Freeway was built to clear that slum to destroy the neighborhood. So these policies all worked together in an unconstitutional fashion to segregate Los Angeles. In 1957, Bill and Daisy Myers were able to purchase a home in Levittown, Pennsylvania, the Levitt Company's second large development. When the mail carrier discovered that he was delivering mail to an African-American family, he let everyone in the neighborhood know, and as many as 600 white demonstrators soon showed up in front of the Myers' house, pelting the family and their home with rocks. Law enforcement stood by as this happened. For 2 months, rocks were thrown, crosses were burned, the Ku Klux Klan symbol was painted on the wall next door. Some policemen stood with the mob, joking and encouraging its participants. One sergeant was actually demoted to patrolman because he objected to orders he had been given not to interfere with the rioters. In 1951, World War II veteran Harvey Clark, his wife Janetta, and 2 small children rented an apartment in Old White Cicero, a suburb of Chicago. When the Clarks refused to leave, a mob of 4,000 rioted, raiding the apartment, destroying the fixtures, and throwing the family's belongings out the window onto the lawn where they were set ablaze. Time magazine reported that the police officers present, quote, acted like ushers politely handling the overflow in a football stadium, unquote. The only people at the grand jury indicted were Harvey Clark, his real estate agent, his NAACP attorney, and the white landlady who rented the apartment to him, as well as her attorney, on charges of inciting a riot and conspiring to lower property values. Stories like this were commonplace, and state-sponsored violence was a means, along with many others, by which all levels of government maintained segregation. Today, African American incomes are about 60% of white incomes. But African American wealth is about 10% of white wealth. Most middle-class families in this country gain their wealth from the equity they have in their homes. So this enormous difference between a 60% income ratio and a 10% wealth ratio is almost entirely attributable to federal housing policy implemented through the 20th century. African American families that were prohibited from buying homes in the suburbs in the 1940s and 50s, and even into the 60s by the Federal Housing Administration, gained none of the equity appreciation that whites gained. Across the country in new developments, these homes in the late 1940s and 1950s sold for about twice national median income, They were affordable to working class families with an FHA or VA mortgage. African Americans were equally able to afford those homes as whites, but were prohibited from buying them. Today, those homes sell for $300,000 to $400,000 at the minimum, 6 to 8 times national median income. The white families sent their children to college with the wealth they gained from appreciating home equity. They were able to take care of their parents in old age and not depend on their children. They were able to bequeath wealth to their children. None of those advantages accrued to African Americans, who for the most part were prohibited from buying homes in those suburbs. So in 1968, we passed the Fair Housing Act that said, in effect, okay, African Americans, you're now free to buy homes in the suburbs that had been forbidden. But it's an empty promise, because those homes are no longer affordable to the families whose parents or grandparents could have afforded them when whites were buying into those suburbs and gaining the equity and wealth that followed from their purchases. Consider children who come from families where they're economically stressed, or in poor health because they have no access to good health care, or because they live in polluted environments. When they do come to school, for example, they may suffer from asthma because of that pollution and are drowsy from being awake at night wheezing. They cannot then typically achieve at levels of children who come to school well rested. When you concentrate children like that in single classrooms, it's impossible for teachers to develop the kind of outcomes that they can in middle-class children who come to school healthy, unstressed, and able to pay attention to schooling. What economists know is that African American children from low-income families who grow up in segregated neighborhoods are less likely as adults to move into the middle class than are African American children whose families have the same low incomes but who live in integrated neighborhoods. So segregation itself impedes intergenerational mobility and perpetuates, rigidifies the inequality that we experience. Another thing that social psychologists have discovered is that decision-making is hampered when you don't have diverse decision-making groups. These psychologists have done experiments where they put people together to solve problems in both diverse groups and in segregated groups. And the diverse groups are much better able to solve problems because they challenge assumptions much more than the segregated groups do. So segregation impedes our political and economic success. We have 3 provisions in the federal Constitution that prohibit the kinds of actions that federal, state, and local governments pursue to create residential segregation. One is the 5th Amendment, which requires the federal government to treat all citizens fairly. Another is the 14th Amendment that requires state and local governments not only to treat citizens fairly, but to treat them equally. And then the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, also requires that we banish the effects of slavery, which Congress long ago determined was any form of second-class citizenship. So in fact, the prohibition on African Americans to purchase homes in federally subsidized white communities or the segregation of public housing created a form of second-class citizenship, which was a violation of the 13th Amendment. We cannot reverse de jure segregation mainly with lawsuits. We must also build a national political consensus leading to legislation, a challenging but not impossible task. Our focus now should be to develop policies that promote an integrated society. Understanding it will be impossible to fully untangle the web of unconstitutional inequality that we've woven. To begin, we should first contemplate what we have collectively done and, on behalf of our government, accept responsibility to fix it.
Okay. All right. What'd you guys think that stayed on? That was good, wasn't it? Okay, unmute yourselves. It's free willing, so we.
Yes, it was. And very sobering, but very good.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, it's hopeful. I mean, this guy's he's been on a mission for years, and I actually asked him to come to the Healing Chronicles, but he told me he was on vacation. So I was like, okay. Are you though? No.
That last statement was made. That'll be the day when it happens, that it's all our responsibility. I'm waiting for that to occur. It's not yet happened. You wonder, will it ever happen? When you think of 2021 and what we've gone through, when you look at January 6th of 2021, when you see what has happened in Congress just these past day or two, you wonder, when will it happen?
Yeah.
And so you keep wondering.
Mm.
Yep.
Hi, Monda.
Hi.
It's Rachel.
Oh, hi, cousin. How are you?
I'm good. I'm well. I enjoyed the presentation. I did. I enjoyed it, and I'm going through.
Yeah,
Oh, my
your
goodness.
affordable housing story. We'll just have to. I don't
Yeah.
know. We may have to do a part 2.
Right. I'm a work in progress, and I'm sorry I chimed in late. I'm just getting off work. So, but yeah, from what I'm seeing, you're doing a good job. Thank you. Very informative. Very informative. Yeah.
I appreciate you. My cousin Rachel lives in Chicago. I think we were talking about Chicago earlier, and works for the city. So she sees it all, and she's in the process of buying and selling herself. So, all right, cousin. Well, thank
And I'm having a time, honey.
All righty. And anyone else before we wrap for the night? We went long tonight, but I think it was, it was time well spent.
Yes, it was. And thank you, Monda, for
I
inviting me.
I noticed Ross.
Really enjoyed it.
I noticed Ross hasn't said anything.
Ross was asleep. He took a little nappy poo.
Yeah, I did. I'm on a new little program, and I could see my blood sugar went up. So I have a monitor on myself. I'm turning into an android. So anyway, I thought the presentation was well done. And it made it very simplistic, so you could really understand what the problems were and how they got there. A lot of it pretty surprising. I'd heard about the highways causing problems, but hearing it again and seeing it done graphically was good.
Yeah.
And of course, you're in the business. What's your experience?
It's just Jason's a little okay. I'm kind of feeling like Miss Margaret. I'm hopeful, but yet, from what I've seen, it's just tough. It's tough out here for those who just don't have, and they're just getting further and further. They're just getting further and further in the hole. I mean, we all have a right to have a nice home, a nice roof over our heads, and it seems really far away for some people. And I try to be as honest as I can. I mean, even to where it impacts people who do have some means. And I'm like, look, I know you. You're not going to want to spend $30,000-$40,000 over the asking price. So sit down and come. Let's regroup next year. Now it would benefit me if I took them around and got them a house. But I'm thinking about their welfare. When it's all said and done, do you want to pay $1 million for a $600,000 house? Ask yourself that question. And if you do want to sell what you're living in, where are you going to go? You want to take the money and run, but where are you going to go? So, and that's a conversation to have with people with means, with people that don't have the means that are trying to, Herman, you talked about some of these down payment assistance programs. Sellers don't want to see those because lenders are layering them. They're layering the DPAPs over their regular loans. And a lot of times it can take a long time, 45, 60 plus days. The housing finance agencies that say they have money, they run out of money. One minute they have it, the next minute they don't. Those sellers want quick sales. Give me the money. I don't want to fool with no, state programs or, they just don't. And so it knocks people out of the running. So that's kind of my take. Cindy, thank you for your comments.
And not only that, Monda, they're taking advantage. They really are. They are taking advantage. These agents are just, and I think the pandemic really has something to do with it also.
Yeah,
I
well,
do.
it's a lot of factors, including moral
Mhm.
compass. So those, people will have dues to pay if they, if
Mhm.
they want to play dirty. It's not
Mhm.
even
Monda,
us. Yes.
I have a question. How long did it take uh, for someone to catch up with what FHA and the government agencies that we pay for with our tax dollars? How long did it take, and who actually burst the bubble that FHA was subsidizing properties just for Caucasians? And what happened with that, and how long did that take?
You know what? I'm not sure. I know that when Mr. Abraham Levitt went to, he actually got support, with FHA and other entities. But I mean, the 1968 Fair Housing Act was supposed to kind of put the kibosh on those kinds of practices. And I mean, for a while, FHA, it's kind of like the mortgage industry. It's kind of cyclical. So just like Republicans and Democrats, like at one point Republicans were, African Americans were with the Republican Party, and then primarily and predominantly they're with the Democratic Party. So FHA is the same way, but now it's kind of like on the comeback, just in terms of being a government-backed entity when it comes to loans, and they're getting in the game where they can compete with conventional loans by offering added incentives. So something just happened a couple of weeks ago. I got to do some research on it, but I can't specifically answer your question, Cindy. You might want to do some research about it, but
I think I will, and I do recognize that back in the 80s, 90s, more African Americans got home loans that were with the VA because they were able to get VA loans with lower down payments, VA backed homes. I do recognize that was an issue, but I didn't recognize the whole issue with FHA. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so and there were a lot of incentives that were given to lenders to give FHA loans, whereby a lot of African Americans could have gotten conventional loans, but they didn't. And so it's a thing. I mean, and you talked about VA loans. Even now, the Veterans Affairs, veterans and active military personnel can get loans from the VA at 100%. But again, these sellers, they're not checking for 100% financing. You know why? Because if the buyer is going to waive inspection or waive appraisal, and the lender is only going to only going to loan as much as the house is worth, unless that buyer has some thousands of dollars in the bank, then that doesn't make it a good deal for the seller. As a matter of fact, I had a transaction in February, and there were 21 offers, and we won because we offered the house. It was in Fort Washington, Maryland, and it was priced at 485, and we offered up to 530 with an escalation, and my guy had at least 5% at a minimum to put down. I'm not sure what he ended up doing. I don't remember, but that was 530. A military person put in their bid for 535, 50, 560, but they didn't take it because they're like, look, we're going to go with the guy who has the money in the bank. So even though we didn't have as much to offer, we were a better deal because we had a lot of money to put down. He had a lot of money to put down, and he could close relatively quickly. With VA, that may not have happened. So it's just it's crazy out here. It really is. It's bananas. So, all right, guys. Well, hey, I want to go put my pot pie in the oven. I'm hungry.
I enjoyed it, Monda. You have a great night.
This was great, Monda.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Thank all my people.
Hey, Hermond.
Hey, Monda.
Hey, look,
Margaret.
Getty's on
Wonderful.
too.
Thank you.
Got some.
Palmer, for all of your advice.
Thank you, Helen.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Miss Margaret. Yep. Thank you, Krishan. Thank you, cousin Rachel.
Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't stand
Rhonda.
as well.
Thank
I love you, girl. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Be
I'm a
safe.
Fannie Mae
Nice seeing everybody.
All right. Good night.
Thank you,
so
Janet.
much.
We'll talk.
Good night.
Bye, guys.